Okay, and here we are, hour number 3. Glad you're along tonight. Tomorrow's Friday. 1 week anniversary. Deborah Tavares was joining us tonight. She has, as usual, a trunk full of data that she's picked up along with Lou. I don't know how they do it, but they're on the road, traveling, going to conferences, listening, recording, doing amazing things to get information together to present on her website, one of them, stopthecrime.net, and on her program, heard here before this program each night, Monday through Friday. Hello, Deborah. Thanks for being here. How are you?
Well, Jeff, the bigger question is, how are you doing? Because I know that you were met with an enormous challenge a week ago. Well, almost a week ago tomorrow.
Yeah, it's, honestly, I've heard, I don't know if there's any, people say that often after a bad wreck, you don't hurt for a week, and then your body says, ouch, and if that's what's happening. I have a fever. I've got, see, the reason I got out of the hospital so quickly, I was supposed to be in there for 4 or 5 days, something like that. I got out the next day because of MRSA. All hospitals have MRSA,
yes,
and I had a big gash on my shin, which is now, I just noticed my foot and my leg are swollen up, and I don't like that. So I was good to get out of there, but I've got to do something now. This could be something that needs more attention. And then my head, from being whacked around, was left in a state of ouch. It hurts.
Well, I can appreciate that, Jeff. Certainly we know that these deplorable technologies are being used on a more massive scale. In fact,
it's so easy to do, Deborah. It's
yes,
just not, it's 1960s technology.
That's exactly right. In fact, I was going to be booking Dr. Ronnie Kildee, Kilde.
I've heard of her.
Yes, an amazing woman. She was actually murdered in February of this year. She talked about microchips, implants, mind control, and cybernetics. Mm-hmm. And she spoke about all of these technologies and really was ringing the alarm. She had even gone to a conference that I was able to get some interviews out of in Belgium at the beginning of the year, and had been talking with her until she was murdered. And it was a horrific situation, but all of these technologies are real. And I'm going to just read an email exchange so the listeners can understand.
Between you and she?
Well, no, I'll talk a little bit more about her in a minute, but I really want to get this out because everyone needs to hear this exchange. Now, I'm going to set it up. Sebastopol, California, about an hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge, was the original ground zero against the smart meters. This area was in force, protesting. There were arrests. We were shutting down local PG&E offices, and this was back in the late 2010 and early 2011 when this really ramped up. And in fact, around 2011, there was a PG&E employee who was the director of the smart meter division for PG&E. And actually, I had received a letter from PG&E asking if I would participate in a dinner meeting. And I RSVP'd and said, yes, Lou and I would be happy to attend. And they said, no, your husband can't come. We don't have enough seating.
Oh, please.
And it can only be you. Right. I did go, Jeff, and I attended a total of 3 meetings. They had various educators about the smart grid. They were showing us smart meters, explaining how they were going to work.
Do you think they could have shoehorned Lou in there somehow?
Oh, there's no question that he couldn't have been there. But he wasn't. And so what my main question at the first meeting was, is what would happen if tenants in buildings that property owners own are invited into a class action lawsuit because the illness is generated from all of the increased frequencies, and particularly since owners of properties were not given a choice at that time whether they wanted a smart meter or not. And they brought in an attorney, a PG&E attorney at the second of the 3 meetings. They said that there was only an hour that he could be there. And he admitted during the first half an hour of his discussion that he really didn't know much about the smart meters. There was a tremendous amount of information that he still had to go over. He spent a half an hour really saying nothing. And I was getting irritated looking at the clock because I realized I needed to get my question answered and asked and answered. So I held up a piece of paper and I said, "Excuse me, but let's just say, for example, that this is a summons that as the property owner of an apartment, we were given, and we're now invited to participate in expending our funds in a class action lawsuit because the tenants are claiming they are now ill. How is PG&E going to participate in the support of a lawsuit in these circumstances?" And he said PG&E would not be liable or responsible in any way, that they were mandated by the California Public Utility Commission. And it was around that period of time that the smart meter director, who was in attendance at the 3 meetings that I participated in, was caught trying to impersonate his identity and get into a Google group that we were all in, communicating about the smart meters, etc. And he was caught, again, lying about his identity. And this ensued in litigation, and ultimately there was a fine. He was fired, and it became quite a several-year lawsuit with PG&E. And I believe, as I recall, it was about a $400,000 lawsuit that ended up getting paid by PG&E. And during that period of time, I and others received phone calls from the San Francisco Chronicle asking how it felt to be spied on by our utility company. And that was just shortly after my arrest. I was arrested on 1/11/11, and I told the Chronicle that this did not surprise me that PG&E was spying on their customers, because that's exactly what the smart meters were doing. And I would not have expected anything short of their behavior, because not only are they spying, they're attaching pulsed microwave radiation frequencies on our home in anticipation of further enhancement with all of the RFID chipped appliances and then the home area network.
Sure.
That we are all fried in our homes.
Right.
Needless to say, time went on. Of course, the entire push against smart meters got out of California, fortunately, and other states have been fighting it as well. What we did discover is that the entire opt-out was all part of a psychological maneuver to throw the activists against the smart meters off course, and for those that were outspoken to believe that they were being listened to. And the opt-outs were and always were only an appeasement plan to give people the illusion that the utilities worked for them and that the CPUC worked for us as well.
Right.
We actually found a document out of the sociology department out of Vanderbilt University that we have on the homepage of stopthecrime.net that talks about how they would socially engineer the utility companies in accepting the smart grid. So having that been said, again, this is around now August of 2011. PG&E has since come under fire on many issues, and certainly the fact that they've been in collusion with the California Public Utility Commission. So what happened in order to create the illusion that the California Public Utility Commission actually regulated the utilities, which they don't, it's all Rothschild. They slapped PG&E on the hand and required a document release. Well, there was a large document release, as I recall, about 7 or so months ago, and different members in this group, this EMF safety network group that I'm a part of, were going through these documents that were released by PG&E. And I'm going to read to the audience a document release, and it is extremely disturbing with that background in mind of what I said about everything starting here, literally in Sebastopol, California, again.
Wonder why they picked Sebastopol.
That was, again, ground zero for the anti-smart meter movement. That was really day one of the...
Okay, but that's a good thing. Now, are they coming back and trying to punish Sebastopol?
Well, I'm going to read these emails, and you and the listeners can make out of this what you would like. And here we go. First, I'm going to just say that these emails were dated in August of 2011. There are only two emails. One is from the California Public Utility Commission going to PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. And again, you can type in PG&E followed by Rothschild, and you will see that PG&E is Rothschild.
It's hard to believe. It's amazing. They're just in everything.
Yes, they are. So here's what's important to understand about these two emails. First of all, there were a total of 6 people involved in the emails, not just the 2 people that were communicating back and forth, but the 4 people that were copied in the email exchange. Right. And the people that were copied, here's an idea of who these people were. First of all, the subject of the email exchange was space weather risks. And the executive director of the CPUC was copied, the vice president of regulatory affairs, the CPUC attorney, and the interim director at the CPUC. And then, of course, the 2 people that corresponded directly and copied those 4 people. Here's the first email, again dated August of 2011. This is from the CPUC to PG&E. I assume you're assembling a high-level task force of washed-up and never were, yet somehow movie star handsome, former astronaut, to handle PG&E's response to the upcoming damaging space weather. Also, please dribble out one at a time over the next few months all internal memos, lawsuits, PowerPoint presentations, and officer cover-up directives in which PG&E is repeatedly warned about damaging space weather and chooses to do nothing, then has its lawyers blame its customers, a.k.a. Earthlings, for an adverse consequences resulting. Now, keep in mind, PG&E is involved in weather modification. In fact, I was personally on the 16th floor of the PG&E buildings in San Francisco, where they monitor the weather, and they have pulled permits to inject cloud seeding and, of course, more here in Northern California. Here's the second email now in response to that email I just wrote that was from the CPUC to PG&E. Now, this is only within about 10 minutes.
Can you talk a bit louder, Deborah? I think we're getting a little low. There we go. Now we're there. Yeah,
this is only about a 10-minute delay before there's an answer back from the CPUC email from PG&E. This is now from PG&E. Just a reminder, we are the first to propose a solar generator in space that will beam RF waves down to a receptor site and convert it to DC current. We have changed our receptor site from the Mojave Desert to Sebastopol, California. Now, this is a very alarming. I sent this email exchange to some higher-ups, and I received some responses to this email and what they believe is meant. And this is the first comment response to this email exchange. I consulted with a top expert, a man who was a high official in an American electronics company with a classified job and deep knowledge about these matters. I have been able to come up with the following. This system is set of orbital sun collectors, which will concentrate sunlight and convert it to microwaves and send it down to a station to generate power. It, however, could be used by aiming to any target below within a certain radius to completely destroy all human life slowly in a large city. Very dangerous, unneeded means of generating power now that we have so many free energy means available. Obviously, most energy providers are associated with and under the control of the U.S. government and Intel. Here's the second comment to this email exchange. I agree with your assessment. This email exchange dated 2/11 is indeed very disturbing. I submit it is merely a wisp of the smoke from a recently fired gun, the visible tip of a very dangerous iceberg. I strongly suggest you immediately file a series of Freedom of Information Act requests targeting both the CPUC and PG&E in order to hopefully get a fuller picture of this complete iceberg and what has transpired concerning this to date.
Okay.
You, as a California resident, have every right to know what your public utilities are doing with your rate dollars. As you know, beamed microwave radio frequencies from space are the patented technique for manipulating the Earth's jet streams in order to turn selectively modified weather patterns worldwide. Climate change is genuine. However, I submit it is simply not the result of excessive human carbon emissions footprints as infamously claimed. The potential to generate electricity from beam RF waves is certainly a possibility with the existing technology, but I submit it is not the primary goal. I submit the necessary outer space RF generators are already in place and have been functional for at least a decade and a half. This is a very interesting trail of damning breadcrumbs that needs to be followed up, in my opinion. Then I have another comment, and this is interesting. The attached emails claiming the beam RF waves to Sevastopol is obviously a joke shared among PG&E and PUC staff. The technology for this has not even been developed, financed, or tested.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And here's a comment back to that. Sadly, the tech has long since been used. Space-based weapons in conjunction with the wireless networks, along with frequencies used to disperse crowds, etc., are old technologies. Most people are unaware just how advanced tech has become. 6 people were involved in these emails, PG&E and CPUC, and the tech is real. So joke or not, when someone yells fire, we must investigate, don't you think? And then there's attachments showing the involvement of PG&E with weather weapons, which they are heavily engaged. As you know, Rothschild owns Weather Central. And also the involvement of Rothschild and PG&E. So what we had was an obvious targeting to incapacitate the initial group against the smart meters, because certainly when we read the documents about the successes of the deployment of the smart grid worldwide, California is mentioned repeatedly as being the troublemaking state for the refusal of smart meters initially. So I just want everyone that is listening to understand the degree and the types of weapons, because, Jeff, you certainly experienced the likelihood of weapons while you were in your vehicle, and they use these weapons on cities and crowd disbursement, and they can increase anger. They can cause all kinds of physical problems that people normally would not.
Absolutely physical and emotional problems as well. We have to keep in mind that we are electrical beings, and there's a frequency for damn near everything. So if they blast you with it, you're going to get that kind of a response.
That's exactly right.
If it's go to sleep time, we just take a half second, and your car is out of control. And I'm not saying that's what happened. I don't know. I don't like to be dramatic about things, but it's certainly a possibility.
Well, that's absolutely right. Now, I just wanted to share with the listeners on Ronnie Kilde's behalf, because she was murdered, and she spent many years getting out the information of targeted individuals, those people that are targeted with electromagnetic weapons, harassed, traumatized, and tortured. Generally, their employment is eliminated. They are injured constantly. They're in pain. They suffer. And this is a real reality globally. And tracking teams and ground area networks literally focus in on individuals. And it's like an SS ground mafia team, a network. It's massive. It's unbelievably unreal, which is why people are not understanding what's happening. But I'm just going to read a little bit of a paper that Ronnie wrote in December of 2000. And she talked about Musada, the father of the Information Society. And he stated his concerns in 1980 that our liberty is threatened, an Orwellian style, by cybernetic technology totally unknown to most people. This technology links the brains of people via implanted microchips to satellites controlled by ground-based supercomputers. The first brain implants were surgically inserted in 1974 in the state of Ohio. And I'll continue with this on the other side of the break, Jeff.
Very
and
good.
Then we'll get into some of the most current water news.
Okay, very good. Deborah Tavares and I will be right back in just a couple minutes. Glad you're along on this Thursday night, and we shall continue right after this. Okay, I'm back with Deborah and talking about things that most people would never believe, but they're all true. Okay, Deborah, go ahead.
Well, yes, Jeff. I'm reading, as I was saying in the beginning, a article that was written by Dr. Ronnie, R-A-U-N-I, Lena, L-E-E-N-A, Kilde, K-I-L-D-E. Was an M.D. She was also the former chief medical officer of Finland. So I think people need to understand the clout that she had in Finland. And
Chief medical officer of the country, the government of Finland.
That's correct.
All right.
And so it's important for everyone to listen. If you want to look up any of her articles, I would certainly encourage it, because she was a brilliant woman and gave her life to get this information out. So prior to the break, we were talking about the first brain implants that were surgically inserted in 1974 in the state of Ohio, of course, in the United States, and also in Stockholm, Sweden. Brain electrodes were inserted into the skulls of babies in 1946 without the knowledge of their parents. And in the 1950s and 60s, electrical implants were inserted into the brains of animals and humans, especially in the United States, during research into behavior modification and brain and body functioning, or mind control methods. And these were used in attempts to change human behavior and attitudes. Influencing brain function became an important goal of the military and intelligence services. So now we advance, we look back 30 years ago, brain implants even showed up in x-rays the size of 1 centimeter, and then subsequent implants shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. And many of you might have your animals chipped, because certainly here in California, if you rescue an animal, they are all RFID chipped. I even discovered, Jeff, when we were touring a fish hatchery, that the little baby salmons, a percentage of those are chipped. And when I asked how do they pick up the signals during the the migration of the fish. And
That's hard to believe. I believe you, but I mean, they're pinning some of these tags in little fingerlings. The little babies.
Yes. And when they release them, they're tracking and monitoring them. And I asked them, where are they picking up the signals on the migration of the fish with these tracking devices? And this is in the instance of the Russian River, which is a river that runs fairly close to Bohemian Grove on out to the Pacific Ocean here in Sonoma County. And I was told that they're putting devices on either side of the banks. They're hidden where they can monitor the fish. Well, I think it's important for everyone to understand the degree of the reality that we have a de facto government structure, and we, in fact, are the enemy. I think we can now realize that. I certainly hope people are starting to realize that. I have known through my life people that have attempted to escape out of European countries during war, and typical routes are through waterways and streams and culverts, etc. In the case of Cuba, people would attempt to swim from Cuba to Guantanamo. Little did they know they would not have wanted to have been successful in going to Guantanamo, but few made it. But having said that, waterways were a very common method of escape. And it's interesting that with the increasing intention and the fact that many people are likely RFID chipped unwittingly, they just don't know it. In fact, this was certainly discussed back during the time of John Glenn, and he was talking about the fact that in January of 1997 there was an initiative with U.S. Senator John Glenn about the dangers of radiating civilian populations and targeting people's brain function with electromagnetic fields and beams from helicopters and airplanes and satellites, even from parked vans, neighboring houses, telephone poles, electrical appliances, mobile phones, TV, radio, etc., is all part of the radiation problem that we all face. So when we look at the expansive mind control network that has been set up over many, 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 many decades, and that has been a goal, total mind control, and we look at some of the documents, Jeff, that we have posted on our website. In fact, one of the documents that is really important for everyone to take a look at, it's on the home page, but you can also type it in the search bar at the top of stopthecrime.net, Aquarius Operations Briefing. And this was actually given to us through Dr. Preston James. And it talks about the planned chemical sedation of the population and then the use of radio microwave frequencies for mass mind control. And it specifically talks about how over many, many years we would be poisoned with chemicals. There would be a polypharmaceutical saturation, and that's already been achieved. And that's been ongoing for the past 20 years. And then there would be the introduction and exposure to everyday use of public water supplies that are poisoned and airborne pollutants. In other words, the full array of the poisons that we've already been seriously saturated with, and then how the increased use of frequencies would work in tandem with the saturation levels of the poison. And it would literally turn a person into an assassin. It would take over their mind. Again, this is the Aquarius Operations Briefing. It's about a 50-page document. The last few pages shows cell phone towers and other methods in which these frequencies would be used upon the population. But Ronnie Kildee talked about how today's microchips operate by means of low-frequency radio waves that target people.
Yep.
And with the help of satellites, the implanted person can be tracked anywhere on the globe. I can tell you, Jeff, right now, many people are buying frequency equipment. They can be as much as $20 up to $300.
What do you mean frequency equipment?
Well, you run it over your body, and it will literally
it's a
alert
reader.
you whether you've been biomedically implanted.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes. That's going to become something rather important for
I'm sure it
people
will.
to obtain. I hear us going into
I
a
hear
break.
music too. Hold on.
And then I want to get into the water situation quickly.
All right, very good. Stand by. We'll be right back. Okay, and we're back with Deborah. All right, Deborah, talk to us about water.
Well, yes, Jeff, actually, this is an action alert request for all listeners, and request to pass this information out as far and wide as everyone that is listening and beyond is able to. We run a website entitled primarywater.org, and that links to primary water experts as well. But on primarywater.org, we have half-page double-sided flyers that everyone can download and disperse. But, of course, everyone needs to understand first what primary water is. Because of primary water, we do not have a water shortage. Water is renewable. And there are incredible documents that all of you can get to on primarywater.org. Understand that we have been deceived on how water and where water really comes from. There's an excellent YouTube up. It's entitled Primary Water Explained. Primary Water Explained. It's important to understand that the Earth is the water planet. And primary water is good news, and it will provide us with all the water we need. And we're being really hit with media psyops and a massive campaign.
Well, the government has a huge budget to hire people to work the internet, to work the media, you name it, and they're working it all the time.
They certainly do. Now, I want to just go over some of the new rules here in California, and by far they're more than I've got time to go over right this moment. But one of the ones that should be extremely worrisome for everyone is this. Again, these are new rules. The state is going to be directing state departments to provide temporary relocation assistance to families who need to move from homes where domestic wells have run dry to housing with running water. Now, this is why understanding where water comes from is essential, because we have many overpumped groundwater basins, and some of the shallow wells are overpumped and they are running dry. However, given time and reduced pumping, they would likely refill.
Mm-hmm.
And the groundwater basins could be recharged much more expeditiously if primary water wells were drilled and that water was allowed to recharge these overpumped areas like the San Joaquin Valley. And this is essential for everyone to know. Every bit of land mass is floating on water, and that's why it's so important to watch the YouTube Primary Water Explained and go to primarywater.org for more information. But I want to just go over a couple of the recent media psyops campaigns that have just come out in the last couple of days. Our Governor Brown has urged fines up to $10,000 for water waste during this California drought. Now, of course, most of us know the drought is intentionally created. But Brown announced this past Tuesday, that they're going to be granting new enforcement powers to local agencies in California's ongoing drought, including penalties.
What do you mean when you say local agencies? And talk a bit louder again, if you can.
Yes, they're going to be granting enforcement powers to local agencies.
What local agencies?
Now, it does not enumerate, but I would be imagining we're talking about the water agencies, we're talking about city agencies.
Your friendly water meter reader? While there's still any around?
Well, certainly many people do not yet have smart meters on their water, but they will be sending Stasi groups around. This has been going on now for a while in some areas, where good want-to-be neighbors will report on other neighbors if they see what appears to be overuse of water. But it goes on to say that the governor's office said that legislation proposed by Brown would let public agencies deputize staff to issue water-related citations among other measures. And you might think this is just another installment in a long enterprise to live with changing climate and with drought and uncertain duration, Brown said. So the fines are a water increase. Easier to blame people for overuse than to try to push and get fines approved. So this is a water increase. They're making certainly the original conversation of $500 fines seem rather tolerable when you now hear $10,000 water fines. So this is just a psychological adjustment to, of course, accept the $500 fine. I also want to point out that most recently, too, just a day or so ago, Governor Brown also increased the California's greenhouse gas emission targets, and they're getting tougher. And my comment on this, of course, is climate change policies are creating new global markets, and it's based upon greed and false science.
Oh, you bet. Sure.
Of concealing the real cause of climate change. And, of course, we know, most people know that the government, corporations, and militaries and international bankers control the weather and have weaponized weather to target, create fear, and drive relocation of populations into resilient cities. Resilient cities, interestingly enough, Jeff, were pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation, and they are intended to help communities absorb shock and better respond emotionally to destruction and death. Resilient cities are engaged in reducing CO2 emissions.
Resilient cities, boy. You drive into a town, there'll be a big billboard there. This is a resilient city. It used to say this is a tree city. Now it'll say it's a resilient city.
Well, that's true, and the resilient cities are engaged in reducing CO2 emissions and identifying people that are not trauma prepared. So resilient cities are about making and helping people emotionally and physically adapt to the shocks and trauma of all
crazy.
The weaponization that we're facing.
It's crazy.
It is.
Everybody who breathes should be declared a public enemy and taxed because they spew carbon dioxide. I mean, it's all nuts.
Well, it is, and because it's getting more nuts by the minute, it's important for everyone that's listening to take some action. And
what can they do? No, seriously, what can they really do? If they send off an email, the delete key. Goodbye. If they fax, the trash can. If they mail...
I think, Jeff, what we have to do is empower people to the knowledge of water. Certainly because we cannot live without water. And whether it serves us in ultimately benefiting by getting to it, just the knowing that the water science is being withheld from us, just like petroleum. We were always told that petroleum is a fossil fuel. And we know now that that was just all part of what Rockefeller did to create more profits with the illusion of a finite resource. And as we like to say, petroleum never came from dead dinosaurs. So just as water is now the new peak oil, it's now the new peak water, and that's not true. And while those of us that understand this are still alive, we must spread this information far, far and wide, because the water surfaces many places all over the planet in hot and cold springs. In fact, there's a wonderful photograph on the primarywater.org website of a geyser called Fly Geyser, F-L-Y Geyser, and it's on private property in Nevada. And it was actually a well that was dug about 100 years ago, and they hit water that was about 200 degrees. They capped it, And the cap eroded over time, and the water just has been spewing out consistently ever since. It's a geyser called Fly Geyser. It's quite beautiful, and the landowner at the time drilled in another location and hit water, not hot water. But right now, the governor in California, just a couple of days ago, has set new cuts for us to meet the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. He's cutting emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. The previous goals, which were set during Schwarzenegger's administration, were to reach 1990 levels by 2020, and then 80% below the standard by 2050. So let me repeat this. We must reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in California 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. Now, it's very important to understand where they're really going. And I have a YouTube up and out. They're aiming for 0. And, Jeff, I don't have time in the next couple of minutes that we have left, but I believe I am going to be joining you tomorrow evening.
Yeah.
And tomorrow evening I am going to break a story that few have heard about new cities being planned here.
Now this is very interesting.
Yeah.
They've got plans they never let out of the bag, and they're big plans.
And I'm also going to be talking about the plans to burn up Northern California. So I'm looking forward to joining you tomorrow night. Take care, and
Thank you.
I'll be talking with you tomorrow evening.
Okay.
And, of course, everyone can join me on my show, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, Monday through Friday on the RINS Radio Network. Thank you
well
so
said.
much, Jeff.
Thank you, Deborah. Say hi to Lou. Okay.
I will. Thank you.
All right, that's our program tonight. Yours truly is going to try and rest, and we will be back tomorrow night. You take care. Okay, and let's get right back to it. Hour number 2 tonight. That music is not working. It sounds mucky, muddy, doesn't sound clear and sharp for some reason. We're going to have to see if we can get a better version of that. Latest from the California drought, it's still there, and it's warming up, and it's going to be even worse this summer. That's the word. California's drought is making its dying inland sea even more toxic now. The Salton Sea. Many of you know about the Salton Sea. So the ramifications of the created drought are extraordinary, and they're not going to slow down. They're going to continue to compound and become worse and worse. But that's the plan. That is the plan. My personal feeling is the drought was started as maybe an unnecessary or accidental or unfortunate or undesired byproduct of stopping radiation from coming in here from Fukushima and the rainstorms, the weather systems in the wintertime, so they blocked them rather than have the storm fronts come in and dump radiation all over the place. If you remember back, the first year or so, UC Berkeley was doing routine evaluations of water, of plant life, all kinds of things, and coming back with an upward graph every time, meaning the bioaccumulative aspects and factors involved with Fukushima radiation were playing out in the research being done. So we have enormous problems, that's all I can say. Now it looks like this summer is going to be the long, hot summer, or the long, hot, flaming summer in California. There's a lot going on. Deborah Tavares is back tonight because she's got so much information, and we had the time, so I thought I'd give her a chance to bring that forward. And are you there, Deborah?
Yes, thank you very much for having me on, particularly on May Day, because for many, they're celebrating traditional springtime festivals.
Right.
I know that children are enjoying the May Day dance, and it's a lovely day also in which there's internationally honoring of workers. But May Day also has another meaning, and it's an emergency procedure. It's a word used internationally as a distress signal.
Help.
So this is Mayday, and this is a distress notification. I'm going to be talking about the plan to burn up Northern California. And what do I mean by that? Well, Jeff, we have gotten a hold of information out of the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors. And I'm going to go over this because people will understand what is occurring here are likely similar tactics that are happening in other states as well.
How did you get the data, Deborah?
Well, I'm involved in a rural volunteer fire department advisory meeting right now here in Northern California, in that the fire departments are going to be squeezed out and consolidated in the rural areas, which here, of course, and everywhere else, because of the weaponized policies of climate change, are reducing emergency services in areas that are considered sprawl. And country and rural areas are considered sprawl. So with that in mind...
why are they being reduced? It doesn't mean there's not a demand or a desire for them, does it?
Of course not. They're being reduced for a myriad of reasons. And it's really quite sinister, because what we're seeing is collectively the fire departments across the state having all of the same problems. Now, this was all planned. Generally, the fire chief's concerns, and we're talking about many fire zones, lack of funds, increasing laws and regulations that are being imposed upon them, diminishing younger firefighters. In other words, they're not getting the younger volunteer forces that they had been in the past, and costs for emergency calls are not being covered, as well as emergency aid outside taxing districts. And so they have these task force workshops that are being held across the country now for fire departments, with the illusion that they're going to help them be more efficient, run more effectively, and look at their equipment. Now, what is really behind the scenes here are several things. First of all, here in Sonoma County, our fire departments are largely funded and only funded by property taxes, and of course, pancake breakfast. We heard in these meetings, Jeff...
These are county property taxes.
Yeah, well, these are property taxes in general that a certain amount go to the fire department.
Right.
But they are also funding themselves to fill fuel to operate their equipment by having pancake breakfast and so forth. And they make some decent money on pancake breakfast, but it's pretty ironic that emergency services should have to have all of these kinds of pancake breakfast and this kind of thing in order to fill their engines with gas. Having said that,
But we have to spend our money on more worthy things like free top-flight medical care for illegal aliens and housing and education and things like that. Those are far more important uses of our money.
Well, another aspect that the fire departments are all facing is that the emergency aid outside of the taxing districts. What that means here in Sonoma County, where we are touting ourselves as a go-to destination for people all over the world because of the wine country and being nearby San Francisco. So with all the visitors that are coming and visiting the Rothschild predominantly owned area that we are in, Sonoma County, there are many accidents, and they have to be addressed. Well, what has been occurring is that the county and cities have been taking over large swaths of private property, putting them into open space and preserves, and also into parks where they fall out of the property tax base. So the fire departments are having to serve different types of calls in areas where there is no tax being collected. So the funds have diminished greatly. The fire departments are working on a shoestring, doing an amazing job with what they're doing. But the plans that are involved here in these meetings, an illusion that the fire departments are going to be considered having more value, is based on this. And this was said at one of the fire meetings, and I would certainly, suggest everyone understand this.
Who said it?
I looked it up on the internet.
Uh-huh.
One of the main fire chiefs that was put in position and has only been in the county for a year, that has rotated to other counties here in Northern California, said that I asked, what is the end goal of a year and a half worth of monthly meetings? When we know that it's all the Delphi technique, we know that the agenda has already been cast. What they're going to do with the fire departments has already been laid out, and this is what we were told. We needed to look up incremental regional consolidation.
Incremental regional consolidation. Did he look at you like you were crazy when you said that to him?
He said
or
that.
Or did he get it? Oh, he was already in the loop. Good.
He's in there to cleverly deceive the fire chiefs in the area.
Gotcha.
Because what they know is that in order to maintain services in the rural areas, again, unsustainable areas that are considered sprawl, is a massive increase in property taxes for those that are still paying property taxes. So that is where we heard about what I'm going to tell the listeners right now, Jeff. Again, I prefaced it as the plan to burn up Northern California.
Sure.
And that's exactly what it is. And everybody needs to pay close attention, and you need to research this in your area as well. Because we have documentation. We have documentation of the perpetrators as well, and that the Board of Supervisors in this area rejected the resolution that was proposed because of big bucks that were behind this plot. So I'm going to fill in what I just said so that everyone understands. This is in Mendocino County, Humboldt County, and the northern part of Sonoma County here in Northern California. After request from concerned citizens and fire agencies, fire danger presented by the dead standing timber in forest lands and the request of commercial timber companies to voluntarily cease the practice of leaving dead trees standing. So what has been happening? There has been a private timber company that is the Fisher family out of San Francisco, the Gap family. They have had control of 438,000 acres of forestry. Their company is called Mendocino and Humboldt Redwood Companies. What they have been doing is slashing and gashing the trunks on the tan oak trees and other brush and squirting herbicides into these gashes.
Oh, wait a sec. Hold on. Now, who's doing this? This is disgusting. Who's doing this?
It's unregulated, and it is a timber company that has the illusion. They tell everybody environmentally, leaving the dead standing trees is better for the forest. So I'm going to just continue with this because it's hard to believe the sense that this is unregulated.
Mm-hmm.
So what has again been happening is the fire departments have been opposing the squirting and gashing of poison to kill the trees and then leaving the trees to die. And also the toxic herbicides degrade into the soil. And of course, these plans don't make any sense at all. So when you see something like this on the county Board of Supervisors agenda, we're generally compelled to look into it further.
I would hope.
We have.
Yeah.
So the purpose of gashing, slashing, and killing millions and millions of tan oaks and other shrubs is to eliminate the canopy of these oaks to provide further growth for the valuable conifers, the redwoods and the Douglas fir.
So, okay, hold on. If you go through Northern California, you will look into the end of foothills adjacent to whatever road you're on, and you'll see a mixture, usually of conifers and oak trees, and there are 1,000 different kinds of oak trees. Now, you're talking about that kind of a forest, which is not heavily laden with conifers, but is more of a mixture, and they're going in there and they're cutting, slashing, and poisoning and killing the oak tree portion of that forest, creating catastrophic dead tree fuel in a forest, which will burn the whole thing up in a hot minute.
That's
Is
right.
that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And what has happened is that the fire chiefs up in those areas and CAL FIRE are trying to get the county to take action and to stop this practice. And I'm going to go over some of the resolutions that were presented that were denied by the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors. I think anybody that hears this is going to be really stunned.
Yeah, Deborah, let me ask another question, please. This bothers me because I look at hillsides like this often. Whose idea was this, and why are they doing it again? Is that your big punchline here down the road? I don't want to spoil it, but I don't get it. Why kill trees in a mixed species forest? It makes no sense to me. I don't get it.
Well, again, they state the purpose is to eliminate the canopies that the oak trees infringe upon the ability for the conifers to get the sunlight necessary for growth. So in order for the more valuable logging of conifers and fir, they're eliminating the tan oaks and other shrubbery. And they have used thousands of gallons of herbicides to kill these trees. And the fire chief up there said that there is an average of about 1 million trees that are killed on an annual basis since 2012.
This is done by hand?
I'm not certain of the process. I would imagine to gash and squirt,
they'd have to.
Squirt. It would have to be done by hand.
They don't have drones to do that yet. I mean, they must have crews out there that just work enormous areas.
Well, this is, again, a private timber and logging company that's owned by the Fisher family, the Gap family. And they are prevailing over the concerns of the residents and the fire chiefs and CAL FIRE up in this northern area of California. And so what we see, and we have been told, that the fire chiefs are anticipating this year to be one of the worst fire seasons they've ever had to potentially face. They say because of the reduction of ground moisture, the reduction of fuel moisture, and dependent on the ambient humidity, they're going to be fighting massive fires. And, of course, with these toxins and herbicides that they're using, which do include Roundup, by the way, these firefighters are breathing all of these poisons. So for all of the listeners, you need to look in your areas. Look at the privately owned timber companies. Do some research as to who these companies are, because we discovered that the Fisher family has affiliation with giving big, big bucks to climate policies. And, of course, we know that these are the climate policies are weaponized policies of mass destruction because it's all based on falsified science. So any grants that are coming out of this, the family donations, which they donate hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis to climate change programs, and they have a organization called the Pisces organization. This family is Luciferian, and they're going against what the fire chiefs in that area are requesting and what the neighbors are requesting. And this is diabolical. And here is one of the letters that was going back and forth from the county, and this is just a portion of one of these letters. They talk about the unmanaged tan oak can pose a challenge to forests whose wish to rebalance the forest towards redwood production. Due to bottom-line cost analysis, a method known as hack and squirt is locally employed to kill off the unwanted species by hacking into the tree trunk and injecting poison. The herbicide use is outside the scope of fire concern, but I've come to understand that the practice involves leaving the dead trees standing. Attached is an aerial photograph showing us just how many dead trees are now standing. I have raised concern to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors and CAL FIRE about the predominantly dead forest impacting fire risk. But oddly, most responses have been of the form, your area is already a high fire risk, and dead trees burn the same as live trees, end quote. The fire chief says, in my experience, dead, seasoned wood burns more efficiently than green wood. And intentionally dead forest in decay is a fabrication of fuel ladders, a pattern of vegetation that allows a fire to climb up from the forest floor into the tree canopy, where it is more challenging to suppress. Now, they went on to talk about how they focused on trees killed using the hack and squirt method and the exact poison, which they listed the poisons, the name of some of these poisons. The County Board of Supervisors had a resolution to consider at this meeting. And the resolution in and of itself speaks largely, because this resolution says as follows. Whereas the 2005 CAL FIRE Community Wildfire Prevention Plan, the last such plan written, this is in 2005, designated much of the county as a risk for wildfires. And whereas Mendocino County has approximately 1 million acres of commercial forest land, and whereas such standing dead hardwoods present a fire danger, threatening the health and safety of the county residents, and whereas there is current regulation of practices of leaving intentionally killed hardwoods standing, nor are there any requirements that such trees be downed and or removed to reduce fire danger. And whereas the forest management practice continues despite the protests of many residents who would be most immediately affected by any resulting wildfire. Whereas the Board of Supervisors is extremely concerned about the fire hazard presented by dead standing trees. Then they said, now therefore be it resolved that the County Board of Supervisors request that the commercial timber companies on a voluntary basis immediately cease the practice of leaving intentionally killed trees standing on their property pending the completion of an independent fire danger analysis for a period not to exceed 6 months from this date. This resolution was not approved, Jeff. They denied it.
Why not?
It's standing as it is, dead trees, and they're of course killing the trees every single day. And the fire department.
It's hard to believe. I didn't know anything about this.
Well, this is why it's important to bring this information to the forefront, because we have large conglomerates under the guise of environmentalism that is and are threatening the livability of people in the rural areas. This is definitely a way in which to reduce the population in the rural areas.
Question. There's so much, they're making such an abundance of fuel for potential future fires that nobody will have a chance. This is an enormous issue. Those trees should be taken out of there. The hardwood should be used. I don't know if it can be now that it's poisoned and toxic, but there's a demand for oak. I don't get it. And if you do kill off the oaks, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the conifers are going to be able to get up through them.
Well, that's true, but I have something even more interesting on behalf of the owner of the logging company or the timber company when we get to the other side of this break.
Very good.
I think you'll be stunned at this.
Well, I'm already sickened. Okay, back in just a minute. Hold on. Okay, welcome back. Having a massive die-off, a kill-off, a slaughter-off of oaks in Northern California, where the forests aren't so solidly full of conifers. You'll find always a mixture of evergreens and the deciduous trees like the oaks, and they're killing them. This is a huge story. I don't understand. And then they're leaving the dead trees there as fuel for fires, which is what they don't want to do. So
it's exactly what they do want to do, Jeff. That is.
Well, I understand. I got it. But, I mean, that's theoretically what you don't want to do, but that's what they're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. And people need to understand when they see agenda items, again, on County Board of Supervisors' agendas, you need to look into this. Again, the Fisher family is out of San Francisco. They're the Gap family, and they have a foundation called Pisces, Pisces, and they donate large sums of money, and they give grants to climate and energy funding mechanisms. This is a very evil group of people that are in control now of 438,000 acres of trees in Northern California. Now, here's what was said, and this is just outrageous. This is what the applicant, the Mendocino Redwood Company, had offered. And this is the fire chief, trying to be nice. He said, I cannot fault the applicant. Best I can tell, they operate in compliance with applicable law and work in an environment of ever-increasing and arguably onerous regulatory creep. In response to the questions I have raised, they've even stepped forward to brainstorm evacuation routes, adding credence to public concern in a desperate need of remedy.
Well, there it is.
There it is. So he goes on, the fire chief also goes on to say this: I'm also not ready to place culpability in the hands of the state regulators. It appears they are diligently following process. Unfortunately, the process as implemented seems to omit consideration for public safety, perhaps because forest management methods have outpaced legislative action. So what we have here is complete disregard for anyone who lives in the rural land. And this is an intentional depopulation of the area along the northern coast of California. Intentional. So I also want to talk about the reaction of those that attended the meeting. It was outrageous. Because the meeting was scheduled at the county in Mendocino between 1:30 and 3. But here's a comment that one of the attendees wrote. The worst part of it all was making everyone wait for such a very long time before finally allowing the public to comment on the dead tree issue. The schedule for the whole event was 1:30 to 3, but public comment didn't end up beginning until after 4. Many people ended up leaving before they could speak or even hear what others had to say on the subject. Instead of making an attempt to adjust or accommodate the big turnout of motivated citizens, or even offer a simple acknowledgement of the inconvenience to all who came and patiently waited, the board supervisors acted as though they really didn't want to hear from the public, and they purposely stretched and delayed out as long as possible, hoping to wear the people down and out. It became obvious that the masses and their voices were not very welcome in the chamber. And the meeting did not end until 7 p.m. when they killed the resolution. So here you had a meeting anticipated to calendar between 1:30 and 3, not ending until 7 p.m. Now, this is what I talk about frequently. The county boards of supervisors, the cities are all incorporated. They create the illusion with the Delphi technique as presented by the Rand Corporation that people have their say. That's why people are only given 3 minutes, and their voices
Folks,
are not heard.
wherever you are all across the country, you're probably running into the same offensive weapons to shut you down.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to throw this in right now because I mentioned the Rand Corporation, and this is something that I'm just investigating that I just discovered. It's from the Rand Corporation's website. It's entitled "Psychological Operations by Another Name is Sweeter." The Department of Defense has decided to change the name of military psychological operations, PSYOP, and it is a good thing. Make assertions despite concerns about the name change raised by others in Small Wars Journal. That should be an interesting journal.
What's the new name?
The new name is, the acronym is MISO, M-I-S-O, and that means Military Information Support Operation.
All right, that's a PSYOP now.
Yes, it is. And the reason that they're doing this is the psychological operations are no more than messages and broadcasts aimed at changing the opinions and attitudes or behavior of foreign countries, officials, or troops. And they have come to have a sinister connotation in the minds of U.S. citizens and policymakers.
I wonder why.
Yes. The very term PSYOP summons dark thoughts of mind control, lasers, dastardly propaganda, or deception. Well, the Rand Corporation, again, has created the Delphi, or part of the extension from the Tavistock Institute, by bringing forth the Delphi technique, again, the method in which people are given the illusion that meetings are for them. They're not. And the Rand Corporation was also involved in the report from Iron Mountain. And I would recommend everyone watch the YouTube that we have up entitled Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Power, and understand that a large portion of the report from Iron Mountain was to determine the optimum levels of destruction of life, property, and natural resources on the possibility and desirability of peace. Now, this is where doublespeak and wordspeak comes in. This is where what they just said, murder, the optimum levels of murder, destruction of life, and the destruction of property and natural resources, and then they end all of that by the desirability of peace. We are being tricked by weaponization of language as well. And I have another story that I would like to disclose in the remaining time I have left. It's a huge story as well.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that when we get to the other side of this break.
We shall do it. Stand by. Okay, let's get right back to more bad news. I keep hearing these things, and have for the last several years, with Agenda 21 coming and poking its head around the corner first, and all these things following, and they get crazier and crazier. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Yes. Again, this is May Day, and this is a May Day alert to listen to the stories that are emerging that we're finding, and they're going to be emerging in your town and in your state and all over the world. We're in a warfare of attrition. It's a scientific warfare. And what that means is attrition warfare seeks victory through the accumulative destruction of the enemy's material assets by superior technologies. And it is the continuous, sustained attack and pressure. Another aspect of this warfare involves what smart cities represent. Smart cities are the corralling of the people into prison zones, because keeping in mind, smart cities are based upon the idea that we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That is fraudulent science. And yet policies are being written in all of our corrupt administrative levels, and all the people that we assume represent us whom do not, are putting forth policies of corrupt, falsified science and creating new global markets and corralling all of us at the same time. Now, why I'm bringing up smart cities is going to follow into this story, Jeff, because attrition warfare is a clever exploitation of the mobility of the enemy to strengthen and to reduce the enemy's strength and make their strength irrelevant. And what they mean by that is finding an enemy means locating the enemy in both time and space. Fixing the enemy is reducing his freedom of action, usually by immobilizing or suppressing their abilities. So this is what smart cities are. They're suppressing our abilities. They want us out of cars. They want us onto bikes, where we'll be highly positioned to face all of the psychotronic weapons and all of the other weaponized systems of economy, etc., in these cities. So while I just spoke about smart cities, I certainly want everyone to hear this story. It is unbelievably horrific. There is a new city being proposed on nearly 8,000 acres of land in the San Joaquin Valley area of Southern California, where they're shutting down farms and ranches in the illusion that there is scarce water resources, which, of course, if you've been listening to Jeff's program and my program 6 days a week at 6 p.m. on Rince's network, you know already that primary water is why we do not have a water shortage, and that water is renewable. And we ask you to go to primarywater.org and get this information out far and wide. But to this city is called, it's a smart city, and it's going to be a new smart city with new trains. And they're calling it the New Ruralism. It's a new town proposed in Central California called Quay Valley. Q-U-A-Y. Quay.
What a weird name. That's the name of a water feature.
Well, it's actually after the controlling CEO of this. His name is Quay.
Really?
But yes, it is. And it's interesting because there's Pelosi connections. There's all kinds of connections with this soon-to-be new town. This town was put forth in about 2008, but because of the economy, it was waylaid.
What's the nearest town to it that's of any significance, so we get an idea?
What I want to say about this location is going to be stunning. First of all, it's important for everyone to realize we have been hearing about this $68 billion plus high-speed rail line in the Central Valley area of San Francisco. We're talking about Merced, San Jose, Merced, Fresno,
sure.
Kings, Tulare, and Bakersfield on down to Los Angeles. Well, this train was approved, the cost, and they've started construction even though they don't have enough money at this time to build it out. But it will take people from Los Angeles to San Francisco in less than 3 hours with speeds of over 200 miles an hour. So what's extremely interesting is that this rail system goes past and nearby this Quay town, Q-U-A-Y town. So
projected population?
Well, the Quay town originally wanted to build 150,000 single-family homes, but in order to be more appealing to Kings County, they chopped it down to 25,000 homes with 75,000 people. Now, I'm not clear as to what they're planning to do, create modulars within these homes to house 3 people per home. That is unclear at this moment, but I found it very interesting. 25,000 homes with the forecast of 75,000 people. Keeping in mind, this train will now run through it. What is interesting is that the holdings company is called GROW, G-R-O-W, which means green, renewable, organic, and water. That is the holding company for this Quay Valley in the San Joaquin.
By the way, just for fun, excuse me, Quay means, I wonder if there's any irony here, a landing place, especially one of solid masonry or concrete, constructed along the edge of a body of water, like a wharf.
Well, I can only tell you that, again, the name in this instance, and there could be some irony, it could be a name that this
all right. Anyway, it's a weird name.
But having said that, here we are with the new train and a new town. And this new town, while it sounds wonderful, is very daunting and very frightening, and I'll go over a few aspects of what we can expect in this new town. First of all, they're rezoning current grazing land for housing and commercial development. And some of the land has been growing almonds and pistachios, so they're taking it out of farm production. And, of course, they claim that it's going to be a state-of-the-art sewer and water treatment system, and they will produce treated water to meet and exceed acceptable water quality standards. And they go on to say ongoing maintenance of these facilities will be provided through the Quay Valley Community Services District. In other words, they claim in this new city that not one drop of water will not be reclaimed water. It will all be reused water. What we have discovered in the documents in the YouTube that we put out, Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Power, that the mega banksters will increase their revenue enormously by the billions and billions of dollars globally by water treatment plants and desalination, which is unnecessary. They're only treating the secondary water cycle, the toxic water, from the rain and snowmelt, when in fact we have primary water that comes up from the mantle of the earth and is created continuously. But I wanted to go into more of the features of this huge development. It's going to have retail stores. It's going to have schools for education, entertainment, and hospitality features.
Boy, I want to live there.
Yes, and I know that you'll be the first one to purchase one of these relocation camp homes.
The San Joaquin Valley, where it's 110 for about 2 months of the year, right?
Well, that's correct, and plus all of the wind with blowing the dust. Many people are very sick there now because of the very toxic treatment with fertilizers in that area. But they're going to have 2,000 acres of retail and entertainment.
No, please.
And they're going to have a Serengeti African safari experience, complete with animals, provided by the San Diego Zoo and Global Wildlife Conservancy. They're also going to have a water. Listen to this. This is very remarkable. They're going to be building a 5-mile Hyperloop transportation system that will weave its way through the project. It'll be the first working Hyperloop in the world. The system is being built by Hyperloop, and it goes on to say that people will get into a large tube, a vacuum environment, that can transport passengers at hundreds of miles per hour. Now, they talk about how there will be an emphasis on reduced cars, that there will be an emphasis on walkability, and there will be the reused canals. The water will have boats so that people can also boat. They can get in little boats.
And they're going to all be boating on their own sewage.
Yes, and it's called the City of the Future. And they're driving it as being the 21st century go-to location. They said it will surpass any location in California. People will want to go and visit this. This is the new ruralism. It is encompassing sustainability, green building, green infrastructure principles, and it's a new master plan community that is embracing smart growth. Again,
well, the only thing they don't have is gambling.
Well, I'm certain that will be part of what they will likely have.
Sooner or later, they'll figure a way.
Well, all I can say is that they're also creating it to be future-proof, in that the infrastructure will provide a platform for future updates and help avoid obsolescence. And they're going to minimize the need for vehicle trips and miles traveled. They're going to have heavy, heavy fines on water users that exceed their water allotment. This is attrition warfare. This is an encampment for those that are going to move there. This is confining the enemy without cars, under the illusion that this is going to be fun and that this is going to be a world-class sustainable community. Again, over 75,000 permanent residents in 25,000 dwelling units. So, again, Quay, this is a new town, Quay, in the Central Valley, where the farmers and ranchers are losing their farms and ranches due to the illusion of scarce water resources. Jeff, I want to thank you for having me on the program.
Oh, you're welcome.
Everyone, you can go to my website, stopthecrime.net, where you will find hot radio show topics at the top of the site. I urge all of you to take a look at the articles that I've discussed on the program this evening.
Thank you, and thanks to you and Lou for doing amazing work. Every time I hear these things, I can't believe it. It's getting crazier.
Well,
and
that
more
it is.
evil and more wicked all the time.
Well, we need to know what the plans are so that
we
people can do what they can
thanks to your
to get
work,
this information out.
Getting an idea of it. Thank you, Deborah. Have a wonderful weekend. My best to Lou.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay, there's Deborah Tavares, and we will be back on Monday. It's going to be kind of a rough week. Hope you have a good weekend. Take care, and we will meet you, in the meantime, you know where, at rense.com. Take good care, and we'll talk soon.